Back in the late 90s, a lady was said to have committed suicide on a portion of highway that borders a swamp-like area, crashing into an oncoming car. I don't know if her suicide has anything to do with my sighting, but the fact that the two coincide together just makes my skin crawl. In place of her death, or the part of her road that she shot off and died, is a memorial. You know, one of those typical sides of the road white crosses adorned in flowers and other memorial-based items. Well, because of my work, I have to drive this 2-lane highway every day, to and from. I've been very fortunate in these times of COVID-19 that my work has actually been steady. In fact, my workload has actually doubled, if not tripled, and so because of that, I've been very fortunate in these times of COVID-19 that my work has actually doubled, if not tripled, because of other people being laid off, and me being kept on. I want to keep what I do anonymous, so I'll leave it at that. But I'll just say that I help businesses create revenue and bring in more clients. Anyway, I was coming back in the evening time. Keep in mind that because it's spring and summer, it doesn't get dark out till super late. So at this point, the sun was just starting to go down, but it was still bright outside. I'm coming up the hill, getting ready to turn, and the lady's memorial is right there on the side of the road. Well, as I'm coming up, my headlights, which by the way I keep on 24/7 because I prefer to practice good driving, they reflected these two lights to the side of the road, directly to my right where the memorial is. Because the reflection of light caught my eye, out of reaction, I look over and I see this lizard-looking thing on 2 legs that's looking right at me and my car. What exactly was I looking at? I'm not sure. Was I seeing a real-life alien? Was this somebody in a convincing costume that didn't get the memo that it was not yet Halloween? It had a look on its face like, oh crap, I've been spotted. And I went from doing 45 miles an hour to a slow 15, mouth agape and all. I didn't expect to see whatever this was. It looked to maybe be 4 to 5 feet tall, with a long tail that drug behind it. I thought it was a person in a costume again, but it looked to be just like a lizard man, a real-life lizard man. It was really ugly too. After staring at me for a couple of seconds as I'm passing, it turns around and jumps right back into the trees where it came from. The longer I spent looking at it, the more I came to the conclusion, more and more, that this was a real animal. If it was a costume, by any stretch of the means, then it was a Hollywood tier makeup and acting job. Why would anybody be out here on the side of the highway dressed up like that? I know people do crazy stuff, especially in this day and age with YouTube and everybody wanting views and fame, but it just seemed to be too far-fetched for me, and this thing looked far too animalistic to be a person. I didn't want to believe that, of course. I wanted to believe it was actually a person. I saw what I saw, and I cannot argue with myself and say that this did not look animalistic. Even the look in its eye had that wild animal look. So, afterwards, I called up my wife immediately and told her what I saw. Because, well, her and I tell each other everything, no matter how crazy. I told her that I was worried, and that I wasn't getting enough sleep, and that I was starting to have visions. What I saw didn't look like a vision though. It looked like a real flesh and blood, living being. It looked intelligent, and it looked very much kind of like a human does. The stature, the way it carried itself when it walked, everything. It's kept me up at night, that's for sure. And the next few days and evenings, when I would drive past that memorial spot, I kept looking for this thing, to see if I could see what I saw. I never did see it again, and I have no idea what it was that I did see. I'm not even sure how to wrap my mind around it, because it is just so left field for me. It didn't look like a monster, but maybe a lizard that was exposed to radioactivity, that became part human or mutant or something. I know I'm venturing into the realm of comic book reality here, but the thought of it is just so out of the realm of normal. I can't even come up with words to accurately put a picture of what I saw. It was a human reptile that walked just like a man and acted like a man. I find the term lizard man to be the best way to accurately describe this thing In my earlier 20s, I was an outdoor junkie. I traveled all over the northern United States and even many parts in Canada to see as much as I could. My whole ideology is that life is so short, I don't want to miss what this beautiful earth has to offer me. I had just gotten out of a very toxic relationship for 4 years with a girl that I probably should have never dated, and to put it lightly, the breakup devastated me. So, I wanted to turn my life around and give my time and energy towards being out in nature. That's what really sparked this whole incident. Had none of that ever happened, I wouldn't have had my sightings as I did, and I certainly wouldn't have been at the ALGONQUIN Provincial Park that day. To make a long story short, I sold everything I had, pretty much lived for hitchhiking and walking everywhere I went. It sounds crazy, but emotional turmoil will make you do crazy things, and I wanted to remedy my pain with nature instead of substances and alcohol and things that would make me feel empty. Anyway, enough talk of broken hearts and trying to heal. Let's get on to what happened. I had a sighting of a reptilian-like creature at ALGONQUIN Park in Ontario 5 years ago. I was hiking by myself, and I came to the end of one of this trail. To the right, the trail curves, but there's a sudden drop-off. If you were to fall, it's about a 50 to 60 foot drop. As I'm approaching this drop-off, and before I can even see down, I hear commotion, like something big moving around. At first, I get excited because I think maybe I'm about to see a large bear or something. But I look down, and I see this large reptilian thing running on all fours off into the woods. I had to double take because in my head, I'm thinking, what am I seeing? I wasn't high, I was not drunk, and I certainly was not on acid. I was sober as a honeybee. I was also the only one around because I did a lot of hikes by myself. I looked around to see if there's anybody else around me that I can motion to ask, did you see that too? Unfortunately, I was the only person around me. I stood there, looking out over the small drop-off into the canyon below, if you could even call it a canyon. About a few minutes later, an older man comes walking up the trail and smiles at me and greets me with a friendly hello. I turn to respond to him, but ask him if he's ever seen anything weird up here. He politely says no, and you could tell by the look on his face that he isn't quite sure what I was getting at. I pointed down at the drop-off and said I just saw this weird reptile creature running on all fours like an animal down there, and I wanted to know if you have ever seen such a thing. He shook his head and continued on with his hike. Now, I was struggling with reality. Did I really see that? Well, I let it go in the moment, and I continued on with my hike. Fast forward years later, and I'm telling my friend about it because we got on the topic of seeing strange animals, and he was telling me about his Bigfoot sighting that he had had. I don't believe in Bigfoot, or really anything that challenges the realm of reality that we live in, but I can't refute my experience, and so I was telling him about what happened to me. He told me that I should go check out this YouTube channel called What Lurks Beneath, and that I should submit my story to you. Well, I checked out your channel, and I was blown away to find that you had a series, an entire series at that, dedicated to just reptilian cryptid creatures. I learned so much in just spending a few hours listening to these encounters back to back. Crocodilian men, Komodo dragon-like people, very similar to what some of the creatures that I saw. I guess I'm not crazy after all, and I'm obviously not the only person seeing these types of creatures. Unlike a lot of the encounters you feature on your episodes, mine didn't happen anywhere close to a swamp, to my knowledge, but it did happen out in the open. Then, my story gets even weirder. Before I actually wrote up my story and sent it to you, I learned about these large mounds that apparently reptilians are drawn to, and I didn't even know if they lived underground or not, or if they lived in these mounds, but they seem to be in all these reptilian stories. Well, I reached out to a couple of my friends who have frequently hiked in the ALGONQUIN Provincial Park. I don't know why I didn't think to do this initially when I had my sighting. I reached out to them and asked if they had ever found anything weird in their journey traversing to the park and hiking. This is where my jaw hit the floor. One friend of mine was telling me, which by the way he's a very experienced outdoorsman, but doesn't know anything about cryptids or certainly reptilians. He discovered what he found were really large mounds, about 9 feet tall, just roughly 6.5 miles off trail. I couldn't believe what he was telling me. This was after I listened to several of your reptilian episodes, and I immediately put the two together. I can't believe what I had heard. I had to sit down and process everything all these years later to realize that this was reality, and I actually saw a reptilian being. I never would have thought in a million years they existed, let alone resided in the Algonquin Provincial Park.